So during my interview on yesterday's show with Coleman Hughes, this topic of fixing policing came up, and we talked about a couple of different ideas related to that. And one of the things that I had mentioned was focusing in a little bit on traffic enforcement as a sort of proxy to fighting a lot of what's wrong with policing in the United States. And I got a bunch of emails about it from people saying, what would that look like? Can you talk about that a little more? So let's do that today. Now, as a pretext to this, I don't have any misconception that dealing with traffic laws is the solution to every problem with policing in the United States. It's not. Dealing with traffic enforcement wouldn't do anything about lack of training or improper training or the wrong training. It wouldn't address qualified immunity if that's something we want to look at. It wouldn't, deal with funding or a whole bunch of other things. But there's a reason why traffic enforcement is arguably some of the lowest hanging fruit that we should look at right away when it comes to policing, which is that traffic enforcement is, number one, an area where police are allowed a lot of discretion, and inherent bias manifests when there is discretion. And number two, traffic enforcement and traffic related infractions are the primary way in which Americans interact with police by number of incidents every single year. And so what I mean by this is, when it comes to traffic enforcement, we're all familiar with situations in which I get pulled over and you get pulled over and are told we were driving 12 miles an hour over the speed limit. In other words, the pretext for the stop is exactly the same, but there might be very different outcomes based on the discretion of the officer. So I might end up with a speeding ticket and points on my insurance, paying a higher insurance rate for several years. I might get my car searched because the officer believes that they smell alcohol in my car when they pull me over. Meanwhile, you might get pulled over doing the same alleged 12 miles an hour over the speed limit, and you get a verbal warning and a have a nice day. And the repercussions of the discretion that is applied by officers to the same scenario can be dramatically different, even when the facts are essentially the same. And this could be just a result of the bias of the police officer. Officers have a lot of discretion in terms of who they pull over when they see somebody run a stop sign, for example. Once they pull them over, who do they question more aggressively? Whose vehicles are they more interested in searching? Who do they have step out of the vehicle for a field sobriety test? When a car drives by with a tail light out, that discretion can be the difference between an interaction that leads to a police shooting or ultimately an arrest versus someone who just drives home, not even realizing that they drove by a police officer with their tail light out. So because traffic enforcement is the most common way that people come into contact with police every year in and year out, and it can serve as a sort of blank slate from which investigations can start, we should be looking at this very closely. So what are some ways to reduce the discretion which can be influenced by bias when it comes to traffic enforcement? One idea is to replace some traffic enforcement with automation whenever possible. By that, we mostly mean cameras, because of course, that is a way to eliminate a bias from an individual officer. Now, you can still choose to put the cameras in certain neighborhoods and not in others. And you may have people who are of a certain economic class who can better lobby to prevent the cameras from coming into their neighborhoods and push the cameras into poor neighborhoods or black neighborhoods or whatever the case may be. But it's something to look at. You can have situations, on highways. It's typical that on highways, everybody's driving over the speed limit. Then you need to figure out if you're going to replace highway speed traps with cameras. Well, how much speeding is acceptable? There are some complexities there, but at least in some cases, automating elements of traffic enforcement would dramatically reduce interactions with police, and it would therefore reduce the number of interactions that become problematic. Replacing traffic enforcement and speed traps with police cameras would limit the bias of an officer in leading to discretion being used in a discriminatory way, for example. Now, it's not a replacement for fixing all of the other things that are broken, certainly, but it would be significant nonetheless. So then there's the idea of having someone other than armed police handle some traffic enforcement. We've talked about homelessness, mental illness. Do we really need armed police handling calls to 911 related to homelessness? It's probably better suited to some other kind of professional. If we can't have better trained officers, trained like social workers, for example, maybe there would be some other type of professional that would be better suited here. Something analogous could be, for certain types of traffic infractions, you would have something other than an armed police officer. Now, the devil is in the details, of course, and it's true that while the vast majority of traffic infractions don't escalate in any way, and the ones that do sometimes escalate because of the officer, there can be traffic infractions where someone knows that they have a warrant and it can lead to erratic behavior. There's a lot of guns floating around there. So you got to think it through, right? This is not an obvious and easy solution, but it's something to look at. But the point is, and this is why I feel strongly about it, when 20 million motorists per year are pulled over, according to the Stanford Policing Project, and these interactions, traffic-related interactions, open the door to such a huge amount of discretion on the part of the officer. It's an area of low-hanging fruit where finding some aspects to automate, finding other areas better suited for a different type of professional than an armed police officer, we could make a lot of progress there while, I don't want to ignore this, while we look at dealing with training, qualified immunity, lack of a bad actors database at the federal level, all of the different things that we've been talking about. Let me know your thoughts. Does this seem like an avenue that should be pursued? What do you see as the obstacles? What do you see as the possible shortcomings of it that maybe I'm ignoring? Let me know what you think.